Familiarity is fascinating. It's really fascinating how we come to accept certain components of our cultures as normal, and we don't really even have the curiosity to seek out different reference points against which to measure these components of our cultures. But sometimes the curiosity finds us, and after spending 14 months living in the Netherlands, living abroad in Europe, after having spent the entirety of my life up to that point in the United States of America, I find that I have more questions than answers now. And it's very interesting because, I mean, all of the things that I'm going to talk about in this video, I had completely normalized. I had completely 100% normalized, as is the case with the majority of Americans that have not traveled abroad. That said, American culture is kind of weird. After having spent that time living abroad and being exposed to a different side of life, a different line of thinking, I've come to realize that there are certain components of our culture that are definitely a bit strange, and some of them are a bit more damaging than others. Some of them are just innocent little eccentricities and quirks, but American culture is definitely strange, and this is for a few different reasons. The first of which being the small talk. So it's interesting because I grew up in Texas, and here in Texas, people are known, this place in general is known for being a very hospitable place. The hospitality is one of the features of living in this part of the country. When you live in the South, there's this thing known as Southern hospitality. Now, it's very ironic because the South is also where a lot of the racial tension was centered in the past, but that's a different discussion for a different day. People here tend to be very hospitable, and as an introvert, I'm not gonna lie, this can be a bit overwhelming at times. This can definitely be a bit overwhelming. In Europe, honestly, people did engage in small talk at times, but the nature of the small talk was different. So let's say, for example, if I was walking past somebody on the street in the Netherlands, especially in the smaller towns, you might make eye contact, do the little head nod, and say hoi or hallo or something along those lines. Here, I feel like the small talk is a lot more extensive than that. So it's not just a cordial greeting, it's more about actually starting and holding a conversation with somebody that you'll likely never see again. And it's so interesting because about a week or so ago, I was at the post office because I needed to mail my taxes, and I was waiting in line, and everybody in line, or at least most people in line, were just starting up these small conversations. People were making jokes about how long the wait was and things of that nature. Some people were complaining. And look, I'm not saying these conversations don't ever occur in Europe, but based on my experience, at least in the Netherlands, these kinds of conversations would generally be the exception rather than the rule. If you're in line at the post office here in the US, people are going to start up conversations. They may not start up conversations with you, but they're going to start up conversations. And you have to be ready for that. If you're gonna come here, you have to be ready for that because, again, as an introvert, that's something that can be a bit overwhelming. And if you're an introvert, you know that those small interactions can add up very quickly in terms of draining your social battery. So you have to sort of develop the social capacity, or just the ability to socialize, to sort of maneuver your way through those situations without allowing them to turn into full-blown life story type conversations, because they can easily turn into those kinds of conversations about where people are from and all of the struggles they faced in their lives. And look, everyone needs someone to talk to, but that's what therapy is for, and that's what coaches are for, etc. That's not the kind of stuff that you should really be divulging to strangers at some random institution that really has no place for those kinds of conversations between strangers. And look, to be fair, again, this can be refreshing, especially for the people who are divulging this stuff, because I think a lot of Americans are stressed and they just need to vent. but they maybe don't have the resources at their disposal to do so. And I'll talk more about why that's the case here in a second. But I don't know, as an introvert, just from a purely selfish standpoint, a lot of times I'm not really trying to have those conversations. I'd rather just stand there in complete silence and look, if you have a question that you need to ask me, then you ask me the question, or vice versa. But we don't really need to get into the small talk because it just feels fake. It just feels fake. What are we doing this for? I don't know your name, you don't know my name, and we're never gonna see each other again. It kind of feels like a mild version of hookup culture, which is something that I myself was never really into, never saw the point in it. I always wanted deep, meaningful relationships. So, I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing, but I'm not really big on the small talk thing. To each their own, but it's just not something for me. Now, again, I think that this small talk is somewhat justifiable because of the next eccentricity in American culture, which is the isolation. Now, if you look around, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stand up and just show my surroundings. I'm at this park, filmed another video at this park not too long ago as well, but I am completely alone. And to be fair, because I'm a nervous filmer and because I'm an introvert and I don't like to draw attention to myself, I do make a concerted effort to find locations with fewer people. Hence why I picked this bench in the middle of this field in the hot sun, because I figured nobody's going to come here, so I can just film my video in peace with no interruptions. But what I found is that it's actually not that difficult to find these areas in which you're completely isolated, because if you haven't been watching my recent videos since returning to the US, people don't really go outside like that. People are not really outside as much as I remember them being growing up. And maybe my reference point was distorted because, well, I didn't have a reference point. I didn't have anything to measure it against. But I know that as a kid, I was outside and my friends were outside, and we were playing basketball, we were ding-dong ditching, we were just doing stuff that kids typically do, and that I still see them doing over in the Netherlands on a day-to-day basis. Here, I just don't really see a whole lot of that going on. And people are just not outside. The weather is nice today. It's a little bit hot, especially by European standards, but for Texas standards, this is as good as the weather is ever going to get. And people are inside or in their cars. I don't know where they are, but this feeling of isolation is very, very unsettling, especially at night, because I think that one of the biggest things about being in Europe is that it feels safer, and of course it's statistically safer as well, but it feels safer just anecdotally because there are other people outside. And I think that people generally feel safer around other people. Here, walking at night, I'm on my P's and Q's. I'm looking around, I'm looking over my shoulder, I'm keeping my head on a swivel, so to speak. And that's not really something that I ever had to do in Europe because there were generally people outside. It feels so weird on a day like this, especially, to be outside and just kind of be alone. I mean, I'm looking at the basketball court. I don't know if you can see it from here, but that's the basketball court that my friends and I used to play basketball at pretty much every day growing up. And there's nobody there. Where are the pickup games? Where are the people shooting around or bringing their kids by to practice basketball? I see a football practice, a youth football practice right here from where I'm sitting, but that's about it. It's like everything is orchestrated, nothing is organic. People aren't just organically going out and about, going on walks with their families and stuff. Everything is just about orchestrating this pre-arranged session where you're leaving the house. It's an event almost, and that's very, very odd by European standards, because European people are outside, especially when the weather is nice. But I'm gonna be honest with you, in the Netherlands the weather isn't particularly great, but rain, sunshine, snow, sleet, wind, whatever the weather may look like, there are people outside in the Netherlands every single day. They're cycling, they're walking, and sometimes it's for leisure, sometimes it's for transportation, sometimes they're just going to the grocery store. I definitely had my fair share of bike rides in the cold, rain, and wind, and while it wasn't pleasant, it was at least nice to know that I was outside getting fresh air. People here are just I guess, comfortable being isolated, or maybe they're not comfortable and that's why they're so on edge and they feel compelled to divulge their life stories to complete strangers. I don't know, but it definitely feels strange. It definitely feels strange. And I think that's something that contributes to this feeling of isolation is car culture. And that is the next American eccentricity that feels remarkably strange after having lived in Europe for 14 months. Car culture. Now, really, I say car culture, but I should say car dependency, because there is car culture in Europe. When I say car culture, that sort of alludes to people who like cars, people who enjoy driving, who enjoy mechanical work, things of that nature. That's definitely present in Europe. In fact, a lot of the cars that car enthusiasts favor here in the US come from Europe. A lot of German cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, etc. But car dependency feels like a uniquely American thing. I know it's not, because I'm pretty sure that in Australia and probably a large portion of the Middle East, I haven't been to these places, by the way, so I'm literally just working based on assumptions here, but a lot of countries probably do have this car dependency. But Europe, at least the European countries that I've been to, do not have this car dependency culture. And I think what makes it really, really strange is not so much the car dependency itself and the isolation it creates, but rather it's the normalization of car dependency. I find it really, really odd that people here just see it as completely normal that you have to drive everywhere. I just find that completely, utterly strange, because in Europe, I mean, kids are riding their bikes to school or just out and about alone in the street even at 6 or 7 years old. I saw it with my own eyes every day that I was there in the Netherlands. Maybe not in other European countries, but definitely in the Netherlands. You will never see that here. You will never see that here unless you're in a low-income neighborhood where maybe there is literally no other alternative for children to get around. But it's not even just children. Again, it's everybody. People here just rely on cars and it's just normal. Nobody even questions why that might not be the most efficient form of transportation for a society, for a collective. And I think it's more because people here aren't really considering the collective. They're considering their own individual lives. So instead of thinking in terms of, hey, maybe an extensive bus route would do this city wonders, instead of that, they're thinking in terms of, how can I just get a better car? How can I get a better car, pull out a bigger loan so that I can impress my neighbors? And I mean, look, again, I'm not saying this doesn't exist in Europe. I'm just saying I definitely didn't see it myself, and it definitely does not exist to the same extent. This car dependency culture has to change, and I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to help facilitate this change through these videos, but I honestly do not think that that is a change that will occur within my lifetime, and I plan to live a long life. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me being a bit pessimistic, or maybe that's just me being realistic. I just know that culturally, forget about the infrastructure, forget about the lack of bike lanes or bus routes or an extensive train system. Culturally, people have to wrap their heads around the idea that it is possible to operate in life, in day-to-day life as an adult without a car, and that it doesn't make you less of a person. Now, you just heard me touch on the idea of getting a new car to impress the neighbors. And that brings me to the next eccentricity in American culture that I just find to be really, really strange, which is materialism. So again, materialism isn't just exclusive to the US. It's not just a US specific thing, but I feel like America takes this to another level. Are people across the world buying stuff that they don't need? Yes. Absolutely. Even people in Europe are living in excess at times. But in America, it's not just something that you see on occasion. It's literally a way of life. People here just like to buy things for the sake of buying things. And a lot of it is, again, to impress their neighbors, to impress people that don't care. It's interesting because I was doing a coaching session recently, and my client actually brought this up to me from this book called The Psychology of Money. He called it the car paradox. Basically, when you get a nice car and you're trying to impress people with this nice car, maybe you have the windows down, music playing loud, revving your engine, trying to get attention, it doesn't actually work the way you think it's supposed to work, because people aren't thinking about you in the car, they're imagining themselves in the car. And I'm using cars as an example of materialism because this is something that I fell victim to at one point as well. I mean, if you've been following my channel for the past maybe 3 or 4 years, then you know about the BMW. When I was 21 years old, I started making some pretty decent money on YouTube, and I went and leased a BMW for $700 a month, $719 to be exact. And it was one of the dumbest decisions I ever made. I got the car to impress other people, and then about a month in, I realized nobody actually cares about the car that I'm driving. I mean, again, I don't even like attention. So once I realized, wait, I don't even want attention from people on the basis of what I have, then I quickly realized that I might be doing this life thing wrong. But by that point, it was too late. I already had the lease, and I had to kind of suck it up. And eventually I had to pay $5,600. I had to wipe my savings clean just to get out of that lease agreement. One of the worst decisions I ever made, and I made it because I was operating from that standpoint of trying to impress other people. I was living a materialistic lifestyle, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with BMW or nice cars or nice things, but when you're getting these things to impress other people rather than to impress yourself, that's when I feel like you cross the line from indulgence to excess. And I definitely feel like a lot of people here in the US are so far across that line that they don't even know the line exists anymore.